To counter every lie about the election results, tell a truth. Here's the truth, a live look at Georgia, where a full by-hand recount for each county is underway. And look at the transparency provided here by Fulton County so that folks can see it for themselves. That's what we need to help people see the reality. Back with me is Carl Bernstein, Julie Rudzinski, and Sam Donaldson. At the same time, there is this dysfunction underway. I do think this is a perilous moment for democracy because some Trump fans, not all of them, some Trump fans are going deeper down this rabbit hole of voter fraud belief, of conspiracy theory. And Carl, ultimately, that's what this is, a giant conspiracy theory, right? If this election had been rigged and Trump had actually won by millions of votes, what, thousands of people would have to be in on it?
Of course, it's a conspiracy theory, but we have to look at who is making the conspiracy plausible to so many people. And that's why I come back to our coverage, not just of the instant moment, but I think in Washington particularly, and in the country generally, we have to start rethinking in the mainstream, quote, mainstream media, some of our coverage. One is, let's take the fact that for 3 years, those closest to Donald Trump in the national security bureaucracy, whether it was Bolton, whether it was Kelly, whether it was Mattis, they all knew, and we knew, that they believed that the President of the United States was a danger to the national security of the United States. And they believed, Kelly, Mattis, Tillerson, and on, that he was unfit to be president. We needed to find a way to report that, get it into our websites, get it on the air much more powerfully than we were able to. And concomitantly, we have in the country this former Cold Civil War, now ignited. We need to start covering the country. What is going on with the people of the United States? It might not be as sexy as covering something in Washington or in LA or New York. We need to have reporters out in the country and change our agenda about what people in the country are saying and doing, how they live. It might reduce ratings, it might cut into profits. But if we're going to do the mission that we are supposed to fulfill, we need to start covering both Washington and the country with a different perspective, and perhaps start changing some of our own rules, particularly allowing those close to the president, whether it's Trump or the new president, whoever he is, and in the Congress of the United States, to talk to us on background, tell us what they think is really going on, and then somehow we continue to give them the cover of anonymity. We've got to find a better way to do it to get the truth out there. And same in the country at large.
Yeah. And when covering the country, that includes profiles of Biden voters, since there's been so much interest in Trump voters in the past 4 years. Let's take a look at Barack Obama, this brand new interview. Obama starting a book tour for his book, A Promised Land, which comes out on Tuesday. It's going to be the best-selling book of the year, most likely. Here's what he told Gayle King about Trump voters.
72 million people voted for Donald Trump. What does that say to you about the state of this country?
Well, what it says is that we are still deeply divided. The power of that alternative worldview that's presented in the media that those voters consume, it carries a lot of weight.
Are you worried about that?
Yes. It's very hard for our democracy to function if we are operating on just completely different sets of facts.
And when I hear that, Sam Donaldson, I think it's an environment that, you know, is so different, so much more poisoned than the years you were covering the Reagan White House, for example, the first Bush White House, the Clinton White House. Former presidents didn't have to deal with this parallel universe problem that Obama and Trump and now Biden will have to deal with.
That's true, and reporters didn't have to, the press didn't have to deal with this universe, which I think was always out there, but always kind of underground until Donald Trump gave it voice, until Fox gave it voice, Newsmax gave it voice. And if you say, we've got to do better, who's the we? Washington Post? New York Times? There's always room for improvement, no matter where you think you are. But are we going to say to Mr. Murdoch, look, stop it. You fulfill that false promise of fair and balanced. Bring balance into your organization. You'll feel better. You'll lose money, but don't worry about it. Are you kidding? And the Newsmax is now enjoying the fact that it's now seizing the Fox audience. It's upset at Fox because of 10% deviation. Are you going to say, stop it? You're going down the rabbit hole even farther. help America. Don't plunge it further into discord. I hope so, but I don't think I'll hold my breath. I believe in the First Amendment. I say unfortunately because I do believe in it, and I think everyone on this program believes in it. But how do you stop these organizations that can make money and also propagate the falsehoods to viewers and listeners who want it? Can you say to the great Rush Limbaugh, you started this, please recant? No. He says no masks. Still to this day, no masks. If there's blood on the president's hands, as some people suggest, because not just of his inattention, but of his deliberate effort to keep the scientists like Tony Fauci from telling us how to keep ourselves safer and our neighbors safer. If there's blood on his hands, what about the blood on the hands of the enablers in the media who also know better? Yet there is the First Amendment, there's a due process and all of that. I'm blathering about this, not because I think I'm wrong, but because I don't have an answer. I don't have a quick answer to turn the country around through the media reforming itself everywhere and through people, therefore, reforming themselves.
But I appreciate your candor that there is no easy answer to this. Julie, last word to you, because there's a social media aspect of this as well. On Fox, there's a lot of promotion of these new platforms like Parler, these social media sites that are catering to conservatives, or at least trying to appeal to conservatives by saying they won't be censored on these platforms. Twitter and Facebook, of course, are not censoring. They're just trying to clean up some of the craziness that happens on their platforms. But what do you make of this idea that we're also going to increasingly see an echo chamber of social media where some folks are on one side using one set of apps and other folks are using other sets of apps, meaning we won't even have a common virtual global square, public square anymore?
Don't underestimate how much these social apps and the social media influence what you see on TV. Look, when I was growing up, I used to watch Sam on This Week every week. And if I didn't like something that he said, or if I didn't like something that George Will or Cokie Roberts or David Brinkley would say, I'd yell at the TV. Sam wouldn't hear me yelling at him. I'd just yell at the TV. Today, you have a much more direct way of yelling at somebody. You could tweet at them. You can repeatedly tweet at them. And don't underestimate how influential that is to the people that you see on TV. They are getting pressured from their viewers. And that's why I say the tail is wagging the dog on social media that then transfers over to the TV screens in ways that never happened in the 80s or the 90s. But it is starting to happen today and continues to happen today. And that has a tremendous influence on the information that you receive. It's the same way that Carl was talking about Republican senators I worked on the Hill. They are incredibly responsive to what their constituents write. They get X number of emails every day. And so this is the equivalent of that for news anchors, the equivalent of that for people on TV. And what that ends up happening is that ends up bifurcating or balkanizing our environment in ways that none of us ever anticipated when we all rejoiced at the advent of social media, at the advent of the internet. Who benefits from this? People like Vladimir Putin.
I'm so glad you pointed out, though, it is ultimately about the audience. This supply and demand issue. It's about the audience. And these Fox hosts who are going down these conspiracy theory rabbit holes, they're feeling it from the audience in an hour-by-hour basis. Julie, thank you. Carl, Sam, thank you all for being here.
There's a lot of deference being given by Republicans in Washington, D.C. to the Trump campaign's legal efforts. So let's take a look at them, because while the president can lie on Twitter, judges need facts. They need evidence. Trump claimed, for example, that Republican election observers were banned from being present in the Philadelphia Convention Center for vote counting. That's a lie. The issue was whether the observers could stand 6 feet or 20 feet away, not whether or not there were Trump campaign observers there. There were. In court, Judge Paul Diamond, an appointee of President George W. Bush, ended up pressing the Trump campaign lawyer, Jerome Marcus. Quote, "Are your observers in the counting room?" the judge asked. Marcus admitted there's a non-zero number of people in the room. Ah, yes, a non-zero number. "I'm asking you as a member of the bar of this court," the judge said, "are people representing the plaintiffs, the Trump campaign, in the room?" Admitted the Trump lawyer. Yes. This kind of thing's been playing out all over the country, where the standards of evidence are a little bit higher than they are on social media. In Georgia, the Trump campaign alleged that proper chain of custody was not maintained for 56 ballots in a state that President-elect Biden won by more than 14,000 votes, but 56 ballots during the canvassing process. The judge looked into that, found that the claim was unsupported. Case dismissed. All over the country, it's been like this. In Wisconsin, Trump-allied lawyers contesting a Biden win tried to stop the certification of votes, claiming they could prove fraud. Okay, where's the proof? The lawyer said, quote, "Evidence will be shortly forthcoming." In other words, we don't have any evidence. Same basic thing in Michigan, where Trump lawyers tried to stop the counting of the vote based on what Michigan Court of Claims Judge Cynthia Stevens called, quote, "inadmissible hearsay within hearsay." It's been frankly embarrassing. No evidence, unprofessional, desperate. Increasingly, Trump campaign lawyers seem to realize being involved in fact-free desperation efforts to overturn the results of a free and fair election might not necessarily enhance their resumes. The Trump legal team in Arizona, and trust me, you do not even want to know about the crazy Sharpie nonsense they were pushing there. That legal team has folded up their tent. Other law firms have withdrawn their representation from the Trump campaign. On Friday, 9 cases from Trump and his allies intended to attack and undo President-elect Joe Biden's victory in key states. 9 cases were rejected or dropped. 9. So what now? Well, now the President of the United States is literally embracing a deranged conspiracy theory that millions of votes were changed using software. The problem here, a group of national, state, and private election officials issued a statement Thursday, which was promoted online by the cybersecurity czar at the Department of Homeland Security, with this sentence bolded: "There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised," unquote. The problem with Republican office holders arguing that President Trump has the right to present his evidence in court is that the president's efforts do not have anything to do with evidence. They have to do with hearsay and rumor and insinuations and lies and conspiracy theories. And once these efforts have been rejected by every court, outgoing President Trump will likely continue to make them. How long is the Republican Party going to continue to defer to unhinged, mendacious desperation led by the gang that couldn't sue straight?
I think we should be honest about America's supply and demand problem and why democracy is in a perilous place right now. The 2020 election is over, even though President Trump is still in denial about that. His claims of voter fraud are the fraud. Thus, reliable news sources are mostly moving on to cover President-elect Biden, to cover the transition instead. But there is an entire constellation of websites and talk shows that are in denial, just like Trump. They are supplying disinformation about the election results. And wherever there's a huge supply, there is a high demand. These crowds in Washington over the weekend prove the point. These crowds are being deceived about the election, but there's demand for it. There's demand for a fictional universe. You know what? I don't want to call it an alternative reality anymore, because it is not reality. There's nothing real about this. But in this fictional parallel universe, the election was rigged. It was stolen out from under Trump, and Trump was the rightful winner. This is the new birtherism. We are going to be reckoning with the consequences of these lies for years. Now, I don't know what you thought after the election. I kind of thought this stuff would start to subside by now, nearly 2 weeks after Election Day. But think again, it is actually getting worse. These made-up stories and claims about voting machines and other fraud, they are airing all across Fox and other parts of the right-wing media world. Trump lawyers like Rudy Giuliani are being given free rein and lots of airtime to spread these lies to millions of people. Those lawyers are losing in the courts. So instead, they're fighting in the court of public opinion. They're fighting on Twitter, they're fighting on Fox, and on channels even further to the right than Fox. And there is a great, terrible supply of this content. That's true, but it is time to wrestle with the demand problem. Supply and demand. Now, to be sure, to take a page from Economics 101, supply sometimes creates demand, and social media algorithms sure do fuel it. But as Jay Rosen said right there, the demand is an important part of this story. There are lies about voter fraud all across social media these days. These lies would not be nearly as popular if there were no demand for it. These marches that Sarah Seidner was at yesterday, they would not be attracting thousands of people if there was no demand for this parallel universe. It's the result of a poisonous stew of social alienation, negative partisanship, severe distrust of news sources, and I'm sure there are other factors as well. Look, the Trump supporters in my life, the people who voted for him 2 weeks ago, they don't believe the election was rigged. They're moving on. Most people are moving on. Most Trump voters do not buy all the baloney that's being sold by Rudy and by Trump and by these others. But some do. It's hard to know exactly how many. But I think we can confidently say, as I look at the ratings reports and web traffic reports, that millions of people are buying into this parallel universe. Something remarkable has happened in the past week, something I've never seen happen in the right-wing TV world. Fox has dominated right-wing TV for 20 years. But that situation, that monopoly control, is starting to break apart. Newsmax and One America News, channels that are further to the right than Fox, that are claiming Biden is not the president-elect. These channels are seeing a ratings surge. And some right-wing media viewers are expressing their frustrations with Fox. Why? Because Fox called Arizona for Biden early on, and because Fox is identifying Biden accurately as the president-elect. I want you to listen to a few of the comments we picked up on this week from Trump supporters.
I don't trust Fox News.
I don't even watch Fox anymore.
Even Fox News is crooked.
How bad is Fox News now? They're the enemy of the people.
This is real. This is something real that's happening. Not among all Fox viewers. The network's ratings are still very high. But there's a balkanization going on, a breaking up of right-wing media, with some Fox fans giving up on the channel and going elsewhere instead. Where are they going? Well, they're going to One America News, but they're really definitely going to Newsmax. We can see that in the ratings. I'll show you in just a moment. But first, I want you to hear some of the BS that's being broadcast on these channels.
The fate of the republic hangs in the balance here.
Trump won the election. He'll win the recount. He'll win in court. He won.
Donald Trump is going to be done with being president in 4 years.
Do you see what he did there? Greg Kelly is the highest rated host on Newsmax. He is claiming that Trump will prevail and that he will be president for another 4 years. This is not reality. This is not an alternative reality. This is a parallel universe of disinformation. It's a fantasy being sold, being supplied. And there is demand for it. Let me show you the ratings for Newsmax. I've never seen anything like this. In the 16 years I've been covering Fox News, I've never seen a channel pop like this, going from, I don't know, like 100,000 viewers a day on a good day. Greg Kelly's now getting 1 million viewers a night. Fox has never seen competition like this in its history. So what you have going on is this right-wing audience that's ticked off at Fox News for not being pro-Trump enough. I never thought I'd see it. Even Trump is telling his Twitter followers to try Newsmax, to try One America News. He's tapping into that anger at Fox News. But you know what? He's trying to have it both ways. He's also promoting Rudy Giuliani appearing on Fox. He's promoting Jesse Waters and Jeanine Pirro and Sean Hannity. Trump doesn't want news. He wants propaganda. And that's why he shares the propaganda videos that come off of Fox at the same time he suggests that his fans look elsewhere. This is all about supply and demand. In this country, there's a lot of demand for straightforward, accurate news about President-elect Biden. Most Americans want to know about the transition. They want to know what's going to happen next. But there's also demand for this fictional universe where Biden is not president-elect, where Trump is not lost, where the fight continues, where the election continues. And millions of people are demanding this content. I know we talk a lot about the supply, right? I talk about Rudy Giuliani. I'm saying he's out there spreading BS on Fox. That's the supply. But we need to talk about the demand. Why is there demand? Why do so many white people want to consume these lies?